I believe that quinoa can play a role as a building block in the transition pathway to more food security in the Mekong Delta. The Mekong Delta is suffering more and more from salinity problems because of climate change problem for farmers in the Mekong Delta. Farmers in the Mekong Delta suffer from seawater intrusion, and this has a severe impact on the rice productivity, the rice yields farmers can obtain, and therefore there is a need for solutions to this problem. And I think that quinoa can be one of the solutions for the problems with salinity in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Due to increased drought and salinity in the Mekong Delta, rice production in the Mekong Delta is dropping, and farmers get less food and get lower income from their traditional rice cropping. The upper limit for salinity in the water for irrigation of rice, at which rice is still being able to produce enough, is about 3 ds per meter. That's a measure of how salty the water is. Seawater is 50 ds per meter, and that's of course way above this threshold. Rice production above 3 ds per meter already is almost impossible. Quinoa doesn't have any problem with that kind of salinity level. It can even grow at salt levels that are half the level of seawater. If we would use quinoa, then we would not have to irrigate with a high amount of fresh water, which is becoming less and less available for farmers. And this would then also save fresh water that could be used on other crop production. Quinoa also has other advantages. The protein content of quinoa is much higher than in rice. And also the quality of the proteins in quinoa are high. It contains all the essential amino acids we need in our nutrition. Quinoa is a gluten-free product, like rice is also. So that is important for people that have problems with gluten from wheat, for example. So that is another advantage of quinoa. Quinoa has this advantage of having a higher protein content than rice, but still it can be used in the diet in the same way as rice. Many of the recipes that are possible with rice can also be done with quinoa. So that makes it more easy for Vietnamese consumers and consumers all over the world to use quinoa in their dishes. If you look at the Delta Integrated Regional Plan, then you can see there is a wish by the policymakers to diversify the diet of Vietnamese people more. So there is a wish that some of the rice in the menu of Vietnamese people is replaced by more nutritious food products. Quinoa could be such a product because it contains more protein. So it's not only a product that is very much welcomed at the international markets or used by the richer people in Vietnam or by expats living in Vietnam, but it's also something that could be of a good food product for all people in Vietnam. If we are able to introduce quinoa in these areas in the Mekong Delta, where salinity now is almost making it impossible to grow rice, then it can serve different functions. It will provide income for farmers, it can provide local food security, but it can also provide regional income by exporting from the region to the richer cities, but it may also in the end lead to exports from Vietnam to the global world market and thereby improving the trade balance of Vietnam. So there are different ways how this could also economically be beneficial for Vietnam. We have already tested the agronomic feasibility of quinoa in various places in Vietnam and are also now testing our quinoa varieties in the Mekong Delta together with Droughts University. And the initial results show that technical feasibility is really available. It is technically possible to grow quinoa at high enough yields, and now we have to see how this can play a role or how this can be developed into a real value chain where all the actors are involved, because it does not only require technical feasibility at the farm level. We take a wider food systems approach to this transition pathway where quinoa could play a role, where we involve not only farmers but also processors, production chain managers, people that sell it to supermarkets, packaging industry, but that is not where it should end, because we also need to know how consumers react to this product. Will they really start eating quinoa? And we know this for the global market, that there is an increasing demand from consumers, and this creates the opportunities for possibly an export product of Vietnam to the global market. But we need to see also how it can play a role in the Vietnamese diet. And for that we will need to interact with consumers, see how they appreciate the taste of quinoa in their dishes. And we already started doing tests with consumers to see how they like quinoa. In different courses that we have given in Vietnam on quinoa production, we have provided dishes with quinoa ourselves even, and have asked which of these dishes do you like best. And it proved that even the simplest dish you can make from quinoa, like just cooking it without adding anything, was already one of the preferred ways of eating quinoa by the Vietnamese people. So we think that Vietnamese people can rather easily substitute rice in their dishes with quinoa, and it can be prepared almost in the same way as quinoa, as rice is now used in the Vietnamese diet. Obviously, quinoa should not be too expensive, because that will be really block consumers from buying it. So from there, the value that is perceived by consumers, we have to calculate back what the cost price of quinoa can be at the farm gate. So we need to look at value added throughout the whole value chain here, to see that every actor in the value chain will earn enough on producing and processing quinoa. Obviously, we need to see how quinoa will be beneficial compared to other crops that are possible in the same area. So we need to exactly determine the production cost at the farm level and see that the farm gate price is feasible also for the other players in the value chain. For that, we also have to look at the markets for quinoa. Today in Vietnam, quinoa markets consist of consumers that are either expats or middle income Vietnamese people. And that is the first market to look at, because that is an existing demand, and that is the supply of quinoa to these consumers is now based on imports. So the first opportunity that is there is to see whether the production of quinoa in the Mekong Delta could replace those imports. And for that, the farm gate price should be lower than the import prices. And maybe we need to also look at the processing costs in Vietnam. So we need to look at the whole cost until the supermarket, you could say, to see whether quinoa can be competitively be produced compared to the imports. The opportunity for that looks to be great, because if you look at the current prices of quinoa in supermarkets, they're even higher than in the European supermarkets. And we are also able to produce quinoa in Europe at cost prices that are below import prices or equal to import prices of quinoa in Europe. So given the fact that there are areas in the Mekong Delta where rice production is going to be decimated because of the salinity problems, quinoa will quickly offer a better alternative to farmers than rice today. That also means that we have lower cost prices, probably, than we would see in other places. We will have to see what the exact farm gate price is and exact logistic costs are in Vietnam before we can be totally sure. And we have to take away the uncertainties about value added in the chain, because we need all the all the value chain actors to work together. And probably everybody has to do some investments or take some risks in this, and all the actors need to be sure that the other actor in the value chain will do its job. Because a farmer can produce quinoa, but if there is no offtake of that quinoa or no guaranteed offtake of that quinoa, that's a big risk to a farmer. But if a supermarket wants to sell Vietnamese quinoa, the supermarket also needs to know that the volume will be enough, so that the demand for the Vietnamese quinoa can really be satisfied. So that supermarket, before it starts to introduce new packaging and new Vietnamese quinoa in the supermarket, they need to know that that supply will come. So they need to work together to ensure that everybody is doing their thing in the value added chain. Technically, it's not very difficult to process quinoa grains. It looks a lot like things you have to do with rice or other grain cereals. So technically, it's not very difficult to go through processing and packaging to get a quinoa product. But still, it has to be organized in Vietnam. And we have to look at processes, maybe small processes in the beginning, because the scale of the production will not be very high yet. But we have to organize it, and we need help from people, because we cannot organize that ourselves. But we will need help of stakeholders in Vietnam to get a value chain based on quinoa production in the Mekong Delta going. So we have shown, we believe that there are very many opportunities with quinoa production, not only for farmers, but the whole value chain and consumers in Vietnam. But there are still also a lot of questions and uncertainties about it. And we are researching all those elements and see whether we can take away uncertainties about quinoa value chains. But we cannot do that alone. And if you would be interested in being part of such a transition to implement quinoa value chains in Vietnam and in the Mekong Delta, we invite you to contact us.